Grüße aus Dresden. Ihr seht hinter mir ein unglaublich großes Polizeiaufgebot. Können wir mal dahin schwenken und einmal komplett rum. Wir schaffen es nicht mehr, die Polizeiwagen überhaupt zu zählen, weil alles voll ist. Es geht bis hinter zum Hauptbahnhof auf der gegenüberliegenden Seite. Ein Meer aus Blaulichtern. Und deswegen...
Today we'll inspect and adapt Germany's COVID strategy. We'll also see that no conspiracies are needed to explain what happened. Welcome to the retrospective.
Du sagst, rappen kann doch jeder. Doch hier ist meine Warnung, schwing das Ding auf einer Feder. Und ich schöpf auf deinen Kopf wie ein italienischer Rohrverleger. Du bist Sachsen-Paule und ich bin der Hardcore-Neger.
Das ist mir zu hart, ich mag's gerne durch Musik.
Oh, did I say I don't like rap music?
Doch was du selber hochlädst, ist nur Schuld.
Let's retrospect the German corona strategy via two maps. The left side is what happened and the right side is what could have happened. With an Autobahn analogy, left side offers very few roads, thus can be called one way to Berlin. The right side offers many pathways and can be called many ways to Berlin. We'll highlight 6 topics on both sides for scrutiny. First up is fear. Politicians and media have spoken down to Germans like they were children, conditioning for fear. In spring 2020, when the virus landed in Germany, the population were suggested that they might face a terrible suffocation death. The solution offered in the beginning was to become an OCD hand washer. It's also true that the physical barrier is one element of our immune system. Yet, until June 2020, we already knew 2 things from Professor Streeck's early studies. 1. Virus does not kill everybody. And 2. Virus does not spread well from surfaces. I believe that hand washing was given to people because people would need something to do to feel engaged and in control of their fates. But the scale of fear messaging was over proportional. So why didn't we focus on safety instead and talk about the mentioned facts or the power of our immune system? Politicians did speak about safety too, but it was merely to justify the measures. Next up, immunity as a simple system. Basically, Germans were told a naivistic version of how immunity actually works. This diagram depicts a part of our adaptive immune system that evolved around 300,000 years ago and has kept us in the game ever since. Immunity doesn't localize in any one organ, nor are there any 2 immune systems that are alike. Understanding the complexity and individuality of the immunity is a key insight that yet remained unexplained. There are many ways to support and optimize the immune system. Here are just a few that I have known at least 20 years. Funnily enough, a German science TV show just validated the first 3: diet, sport and de-stressing. If you want to know more, the place to go is not your family doctor, because they know very little about the immunity as a whole. Instead, you are much better served at your local functional medicine doctor or even at your local biohacker community. To summarize, immunity is a complex system, but it was never communicated as such. Next up, lockdowns, masks, vaccinations. Germany had 2 brutal lockdowns. 2 months in 2020 and 6 months in 2021. I think they did more harm than good. Here are 6 reasons that you can read. Digging a bit deeper into the first and last, as per this Spiegel article, up to 41,000 businesses had to close due to corona lockdowns. And as per this article, some lockdowns were unnecessary. By the way, this is Health Minister Lauterbach, and we'll come back to him later. He's special. Masks have been used pretty much non-stop in Germany, and they are still active in hospitals and trains, I believe. Now, masking is a disputed topic. It might help, but they are pure torture for anyone with allergy, asthma or eye issues. And it's still common to see people wearing masks alone in their private cars in Germany, which is beyond comprehension. Vaccinations began in December 2020, and they saved many lives, especially in the elderly age group. The Bundestag went so far as to vote for mandatory vaccination, but outcome was negative. Austria, in the neighbor, did it, but they reverted back just after 2 months. Here, the health minister again is voting for the mandate. Let's handle him now. He is a doctor, but I don't call him such since he doesn't act like one. When Corona started, he basically booked himself into enough TV programs to be considered as a Corona expert. And the new Chancellor Scholz, after Merkel, then took him into his new government in December 2021. He's considered in Germany as the panic maker due to his many unfulfilled doomsday predictions. Here he says that mandatory vaccination would be great because it would lead the unvaccinated taking the jab voluntarily. Okay. Here he warns about a killer variant that never came, and this is his problem. He doesn't wait for the science to be ready, but often announces a new threat and always offers more vaccinations as a solution. Now, I am not against vaccinations if they happen under people's free will, but I am against politicians claiming to be scientific when they are not. A few people have raised their voices against Lauterbach's anti-scientific sentiment. One of them is virologist Klaus Söder. Here is the news of him getting COVID despite being 4 times vaccinated, which did nothing to his hardliner view. Then he moved to transmission protection, which is scientifically weak. Recently, he hinted that vaccines protect our brains from COVID or long COVID. Well, we don't know that yet for sure, and we have to remember that even a normal flu really messes up our neurotransmitters. By the way, here is his salary package so you can check if it stems with the quality of his work. He also said that pharma companies won't get rich with vaccines, which is clearly false. I'm okay with companies making money, don't get me wrong, but I'm not okay with lying politicians. The health ministry has spent millions of euros in vaccination campaigns. Here are a few samples from the currently running campaign I Protect Myself. Let's fix the fallacies in them, shall we? The one on the left hints that vaccination protects a young nurse 100%, which is a meaningless statement since a healthy young person isn't in a risk of severe COVID anyhow. The one on the right hints that a vaccinated fitness trainer wouldn't transmit a virus to seniors, which is obviously false. Now, Mr. Lauterbach, why misinformation? Those Germans who experienced vaccine side effects have been effectively left alone, sick, unable to work, with massive medical bills. Now, Mr. Lauterbach, why aren't they catered for? German doctors were and still are well incentivized for giving vaccinations. 28 euros per shot. Now, if one worked in a bigger center, one could easily make 150 euros per hour, amounting over 33,000 per month. Mr. Lauterbach, why weren't other solutions incentivized as well? Going forward, I would recommend some voluntary masking and vaccinations and factual campaigns with less emotional hooks and less misinformation. I think we can leave the lockdowns be because they do too much collateral damage. Next up, blaming the unvaccinated. Let's first understand how the 2G rule excluded the unvaccinated. Basically, the vaccinated and recently recovered could go everywhere, but the unvaccinated could only visit grocery stores, pharmacies and doctors' offices. No cafes, no restaurants, no libraries, no specialty shopping, no hobbies. For example, whacking golf balls on the range alone was denied. Alone. Think about it. Now, this level of exclusion is unnecessary discrimination. According to Lauterbach, it's not discrimination, but unequal treatment. But there is more. Let's add the element of blaming on top. Here a famous singer says that the unvaccinated are transmitters and threats. Here a famous moderator attacks them. Here a famous bureaucrat blames them, talking about the tyranny of the unvaccinated. Philosophically, his stance is laughable, since by definition an excluded subpopulation cannot exert tyranny on anyone. Nobody is weaker in a society than the excluded. But how did this hateful blaming start? The first time I heard it was from this fellow.
Es handelt sich eine Pandemie der Ungeimpften, meine Damen und Herren. Auf den Intensivstationen liegen leider zu 90% ungeimpfte Patienten.
The Bavarian ruler, Mr. Söder, was one of the instigators of the meme Pandemic of the Unvaccinated around November 2021. Unfortunately, this meme was never true. Just look at the data from that time. Breakthrough infections for cases, hospitalizations, ICUs and deaths are majority in the elderly age group. Those people with most risk. Yes, we could relativize these numbers with the ratios of the unvaccinated and the vaccinated, but the point here is that these numbers would have to be close to zero in order to claim the pandemic of the unvaccinated. A few scientists did point this out at the time, but politicians just didn't listen and media didn't highlight it. Had the politicians looked at their own football teams, they would have seen that virus ransacked them regardless of vaccination status. All this information was readily available, but instead they chose to blame the unvaccinated. Here's an article from November 21 that summarizes the motto of the nation: Impfen, Impfen, Impfen. And here are two more politicians from around the same time telling fairy tales. One saying that ICUs have 99% unvaccinated, and another that vaccines have no side effects. And here is a chief of an intensive care unit telling a different story around the same time. He's saying in a video that around 2/3 of the ICU patients were unvaccinated, not 99%. Mostly old people and those with risk factors. He also said that vaccines protect from severe COVID, but carry real side effects. He also mentioned about structural discrimination against the unvaccinated in Germany. Next time, instead of blaming subpopulations, why not respect individual responsibility instead? I mean, Sweden and Finland did so, and they fared up quite well with the pandemic. People tend to do the right thing without forcing them. Next up, suppression of dissent. From the first lockdowns onwards, there was a steady growth in public protesting. In some cities, police controlled social distancing with measurement stick. This example comes from Frankfurt in December 21.
Haben Sie das vorhin bei der Demo am Opernplatz auch gemacht?
Pflegeheime, Arztpraxen, Rettungsdiensten und Geburtshäuser beschlossen. Das ist bis
Risking the penalties, some people still went out to silently protest every night. This movement was called the Spaziergang movement, a non-violent response to insane rules. This stubbornness really pissed off the politicians who now ordered police to use force.
Ich hab ja einhängen und durch, oder? Einhängen!
Los! Ich wiederhole, hören Sie auf, gegen die Polizeikräfte zu drücken. Wir werden unmittelbaren Zwang in Hilfe auf den Schlagstock anwenden. Gehen Sie zurück! Gehen Sie zurück und hören Sie auf, gegen die Polizeikräfte zu drücken.
Macht da einfach mal auf! Was soll die Scheiße, ihr Idioten?
But not all public servants were mindless puppets. This gentleman is the police director in Stuttgart who declined ordering his troops to use batons against the Spaziergänger because he thought it was just too much. Now comparing this to Stockholm at the same time, feel the difference. One quick admission. The Spaziergang movement changed its name to Freiheit movement after Russia attacked Ukraine. They also began incorporating some level of pro-Russian propaganda. This I cannot have. Therefore, I want to publicly distance myself from the German Freiheit movement. I don't want to have anything to do with them. In matters of Corona, they were right, but in matters of Russia, they don't know that they don't know. How did the politicians and police justify and accept levels of violence? Let's look at a similar phenomena from this year. Remember how Russia found the casus belli? Basically, Putin demonized Ukraine to justify the war. In Germany, the mind virus of pandemic of the unvaccinated led to the demonization of the unvaccinated. But here we must be careful because these cases are not the same. I believe the Russian info war is designed, but I do not think that the German witch hunt was. So in Germany it was undesigned. Sure, Merkel did give the Order of Merit to BioNTech founders just after 3 months after the first job was ever given. In hindsight, that was a bit hasty, wasn't it? So how to wrap our heads around this? How to understand why things went down as they did? We must think this one through the eyes of a politician. So the following biases are a better explanation than any conspiracy. First, Merkel hastily awards the vaccine people and sends a message that impfen is the official way forward. Then, politicians fall into confirmation bias, only seeing the information that suits the given path. Then, groupthink begins to reign, and huge peer pressure makes it impossible for any contradiction information even to surface. Then, we are already so deep in our investment that we feel obligated to follow it through. This is called the sunk cost fallacy. These 4 biases already explain a lot. No conspiracies needed. Self-gratification may have played a role as well. Just look at how the instigators today are doubling down. They are unmoved by the new scientific information and just keep reliving a fantasy where they did a great job. Especially noteworthy is Jens Spahn's new book titled "We Will Have to Forgive Each Other a Lot." Do we? Do they? I'd like to ask him about these 4 people groups. Who must they forgive? Good old job security might have played a role as well. Politicians are people too, and they want to stay in their jobs enjoying those big salaries. One could ask if politicians hid behind confidential liability clauses made with vaccine companies. I don't know. What do you think? Please write in the comments. The instigators fucked up. Twice. Instead of suppressing dissent, it would be much wiser to allow at least some dissent to let out the steam and then learn from each other in an open dialogue. Moving on. Universal risks and solutions. Quite a few people still don't know why universal solutions are not the way to go with Corona. Let's have Mike from High Intensity Health tell this one.
Things we heard. So the number one conspiracy theory that turned out to be true is everyone's risk for dying is not the same. It turns out that underlying health conditions increase the probability or the odds that you even get COVID-19. So we talked about that study before that found that obese individuals are 46% more likely to test positive for COVID-19. We talked about the underlying health conditions, the hypertension, the high blood pressure, the uncontrolled diabetes, all of the cardiometabolic issues. All of those factors, friends, were more commonly found in people who were hospitalized or died or had severe COVID-19. Okay, so everyone's risk of getting severe COVID is not the same. A lot of people have been double and triple masking. They have boosters. They're masking in their cars still to this day, and they are under the age of 65. What the media didn't do a good job of doing is letting you know about the realistic figures and statistics when it comes to who is actually dying.
You've got a higher risk of severe COVID if you are unvaccinated and at the same in a risk group, or if your immunity is impaired. Dutch ministry continues with risk factors that you can read yourself. Kudos to Netherlands for making this so clear. Job well done. In the USA, the CDC also lists mental health conditions like depression as a risk factor. They used to list anxiety as well, but that's now removed. I'd still count anxiety and chronic stress good candidates that can impair our immunity. To summarize, this is what we have known about severe COVID since mid-2020s. And this is what we have known about immunity since at least the 1990s, maybe even longer. I have two pleas. Please stop forcing vaccinations to people outside risk groups. And please stop saying that your COVID was mild due to a vaccine, because you simply cannot prove it. Another example of a stupid universal rule. This is Jens Spahn, the previous health minister. Under his rule, an absolutely crazy process for proving recovery was defined. The law of the prevention and control of infectious diseases in humans. What this law actually means in practical terms, and this is the happy route. If you are sick with COVID and you got a positive PCR test, then you can go to your local pharmacy and ask nicely, bitte, and you'll get an access document to the society called Genesenen Nachweis. Now comes the unhappy path. If you're again sick with COVID, starting from the left, but your PCR was negative, in this case false negative. And if your antibodies are high, let's say over 10,000 AUs per milliliter, when you then go to your pharmacy, you won't get the Genesenen Nachweis. Your access to society is denied, even though you were sick and even though you could prove that you were sick. The fact that German health officials deny the existence of antibodies is absurd. Even if a person had only a few antibodies, they would still have the B cells that I mentioned before that can produce more. So, next time, let's put more focus on individual risks and individual solutions. People can assess their risk level themselves and then act accordingly. Trust the people. There you have it, a failed strategy and its instigators in a wall of shame. Each instigator had a huge staff to find out and coordinate scientific information, yet they failed. Please think of them when you vote next time. Let's add German media there too, since they failed in scientific reporting as well and caused a serious split in the fabric of German society. And here are the heroes of the story, alongside with my proposal for the next pandemic. What do you think? Please comment. Many mistakes were made, and those who made them don't want to be reminded. Wherever you are, be safe, my friend, and remember, many roads lead to Berlin.